Really, there's three things we're going to be doing this week. We're going to be looking at understanding what a contract actually is. Then we're going to look at the first element of a contract, agreement. Specifically, we're going to be looking at offer and acceptance. And when we know that we actually have a valid offer in place and when we know that we actually have acceptance, we're then going to move on and start talking about what we need is not just agreement, we actually need an intention to create a contract. So they're the two key elements that we're looking at. Do we have agreement? Do we have intention for this week? At the end of this, that should allow you to understand those key legal principles required for a contract and to be able to apply them to some fact situations that you are likely to see in the real world. We've got some readings there for us to have a look at, and part of those readings will help you understand what a contract actually is. Contracts are central to modern life, well, life in general, and business in particular. So there can be contracts for goods, when you buy a cup of coffee, when you buy a book. There are contracts for services and contracts of employment. There are things like leases, getting a service like your haircut is all part of a contract. As well as things like leasing your house where you live, etc., and getting the use of something for a period of time. So contracts, as you can see, are really critical to modern life. Contracts aren't just agreements. There's a difference, right? A contract is a legally enforceable agreement, and that's what really separates it from just two people agreeing to do something. Now, as well as that, we need to understand that there are some misconceptions about contract. One of those misconceptions is it needs to be in writing, and it doesn't. You can have a legally enforceable contract, even if it's just verbal, even if it's just something you say to each other. Even more so, you can have a contract in place just by what you do, that it's implied by your conduct that there should be a legally enforceable contract in place. So it's a little bit more complex than what should be written down. So when you go and buy a coffee at the local coffee shop, that actually involves a legally enforceable contract, even though nothing might be written down as part of that process. Also importantly, when a contract takes place, might not be at the time that the agreement's made. Why don't we have a look at something for that? So one kind of contract occurs when things happen simultaneously. So let's just take my coffee example. So you've got me, Gavin, and I go into the coffee shop to buy my cup of coffee. What actually happens? Well, I give across my $3.50 and they give across the coffee. So what we have is my offer to buy, my acceptance occurs after I offer to purchase it. They take my money and then they deliver the coffee. So what we have are the promises of paying $3.50 and of delivering the coffee. Those promises occur simultaneously with the payment of the money and the delivery of the coffee. So we have the promise and the delivery occurring at the same time. Now let's just take a little amendment to that scenario, and hopefully you'll be able to see that they don't need to occur at the same time. Now just say I go into the coffee shop and I order my coffee. So what I've said is I will promise to pay $3.50. So this is actually a promise to pay my $3.50. And then the coffee shop gives me the coffee, so I get my coffee. But I go, oh, no wallet. So I've got no wallet. And I say, hey, I'm really sorry, I left my wallet up in my office. Can I take the coffee and pay you later? So in essence, they're giving me credit. They're allowing me to buy the coffee on credit. Now, if they say yes, and I take the coffee away, what's happened? We have a contract, because here you can actually see I've promised to pay the $3.50. In this particular instance, they've actually delivered the coffee, so they've fulfilled their side of the bargain. So they've done that, but they've also delivered the goods for me in terms of the coffee. What hasn't happened is I still have to pay. I now have the obligation to pay that $3.50. So the promise to pay and give the coffee happening simultaneously, that happens simultaneously in a lot of situations up here, but they don't necessarily need to occur simultaneously. In fact, I could tell the coffee shop, deliver a coffee to me tomorrow and I will pay you the day after. So even their delivery of the coffee could occur, say, after we have our agreement, if they agreed to that. So the delivery of the contract and the actual, the delivery of the contract in terms of the money paid or the coffee doesn't need to happen at the same time that the promises are actually made. So once again, some contracts are formed and performed at the same time, while with other contracts, one or both of the parties make a promise and have an ongoing obligation once that agreement's been formed, and the performance of the contract is at a different point in time to when they're actually formed. So what are 3 agreements I've actually made today as part of contract law, say? Bought a kebab at the kebab shop, so there was a contract there where I agreed to pay. See, they started making the kebab, so I've agreed that I'm going to pay, I think it was about $9.50 for my kebab, and they agree to make me one, and then they make it, and I give them the money as part of that, so I bought that. Was there any other contract that I had? I actually walked to work. If I had caught the bus, there would have been a contract for me to catch the bus. Paid my mobile phone bill, which was me fulfilling my part of the deal for the contract on my mobile phone. So there's kind of 3 contracts just for me that have occurred today or been part of my daily life today. So to get a contract, these aren't the only things we need, but they're 3 of the critical elements that we really need to concentrate on. We need to have agreement, we need to have an intention to be legally bound, and we need consideration. You can see here that the intention, agreement, and consideration are the first 3 steps to have a valid contract. We also need to make sure that the parties have the capacity to contract, that consent's genuine, and that the objects or the purpose of the contract is actually legal. If we don't have those, then a contract may be invalid. We're going to concentrate on these first 3 steps, but whenever you're looking at a contract problem, you need to go through all 6, make sure they're all there, because if they're not all there, you might not have a valid contract. One way to think about it, think about that the little phrase there, I always consider chocolate consumption legal. Intention, agreement, consideration, capacity, consent, legality. We've got to go through those steps to establish that we do have a valid contract in place.